Hi, my name is Kailash and welcome to the BTS of my creative process. This is where most of my ideas are generated and come to life, but let's rewind to a few weeks ago. At the beginning of the project, we were given 4 artifacts to individually research: a still image, an object, a sound piece, and moving images. And a couple of days later, we brought that into smaller group discussions and spoke about phenomenological and autoethnographical questions. This allowed us to share our personal opinions and insights on the artifacts. Keywords from those discussions. For one session, we were told to bring in an object and talked about 3D mapping. I chose to bring in my Nintendo DS, and the result turned out pretty good. Don't get me wrong, I did other attempts, but they didn't turn out as good as this final one. At the end of the week, I had to end up going to the library because I had to take some time off during the last week. The research task that I was catching up on had been called Library Bingo. You had to at least fill in 4 slots, and as I was on a time crunch, I did just that amount. The 4 slots that I ended up filling in were a body of text, a black and white photograph, a book title, and something about love. After that, I swiftly moved on to the little butterflies task. I had chosen each topic using a random generator and was going through each section. The first category was shows. I chose the YSL Worldwide Cup in 1998 in Paris. Objects, I chose hat pins and cross-stitching. Artists, I picked Anselm Kiefer. For film and TV, I chose Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. And for iconography and symbols, the hair. For music, It Is What It Is by Blood Orange. Each topic was rather interesting to research, however some had more information available than others. I chose to further my research by looking on trend forecasting websites such as WGSN and LSN Global. One topic I chose to move forward with was hat pins, and found that due to adaptations in products they're no longer necessary, but people still do add accessories onto their hats and accessorize their hair. Some cultures still do include hat pins in their traditional wear, but generally people don't. Moving forward, we were told to evaluate and summarize our research into 4 key themes. We did this by looking for patterns, in which we could divide each topic into 4 smaller subtopics. This was to spark inspiration and open up new perspectives using different interdisciplinary approaches. And this process was titled Speculative Design and Thinking. Each topic was rather interesting to research, however some had more information available than others. I chose to further my research by looking on trend forecasting. Around this point we were all arranged one-to-ones to note our progress and keep us on track. The next 4 weeks we used for design sprints, one for each artifact. During this time we were able to prototype and note down ideas. One process that I found super useful during this time were the 5-minute free writing tasks. These helped me evaluate what I truly wanted each artifact to convey. In these tasks, we were asked to answer questions like, what does it mean to be me? What do I care about? What makes me feel angry? Etc. After that, I would use the other time working on concept boards. These focused on the imagery, narrative, colour palette, and lexicon. The lexicon and narrative were most important to the design process. These were all divided by the initial key themes and categorized by each object type. They produced the whole feel of the artifacts, which I was able to refer back to. The theme for my still image was vulnerability, based on how my relationships and creativity coincide. Although this was the first design sprint, I'd struggled with this the most. I had written down some ideas, but they never felt truly personal, which is important due to the module revolving around selfhood. I presented some of these ideas to Callum Knight. While he liked some of my ideas for my other artifacts, he believed my current ideas were too simple and partially overdone, which I agreed with. As I continued with the work, I realised it didn't have to overtly make sense to others. So I chose to pick out some imagery that held some sentiment and just made sense to me. With those items, I experimented a bunch with tools on Adobe Illustrator. From this, the final artifact was born. My still image artifact is named Interactions and is based on childlike illustrations. It features 3 childhood images of mine, one of me and my mum, and one of me and my sister. These images represent not just these relationships, but all other family relationships, and show that they hold importance. These are made to look like they've been pasted on with PVA glue onto calico fabric. This is often used as a base to make mock-ups, and the grid overlay on top is to show how outside perfection this piece is. The doodles on top are made to represent some small parts of my life, e.g. childhood teddy and my signature. And the mandala on top is meant to represent a burst of colour and expression of self. The theme for this artifact was materialism. From the little butterflies task, I knew I wanted to make something using cross-stitch. I had some prior experience of working with this technique and saw an opportunity to utilise this skill. Focusing on the texture element in my research, I found 2 articles on WGSN One linked to key textiles in Women's Summer 26 and mentioned the rise of country bohemia, a phrase which summed up an increase in maximalistic style with bold pattern clashing, and the other mentioning traditional rustic textures and construction techniques of fabric. For the actual piece, I decided on the design of an old bedding which me and my sister used to have when sharing our room. I had no images of this bedding and asked my sister if she had some. The only one containing the pattern was a meme that she had made. Using what I'd been provided, I made a draft pattern using Adobe Illustrator. To connect the design to modern day, I altered the pattern to resemble a Frutiger era style. Some examples of those designs are shown. After this, I decided to get on with the actual stitching. Honestly, it was a tiring task. It ended up being tedious, time-consuming, and painful. Despite working on it for 2 weeks, I'd only completed a minimal amount. This is when I had a one-to-one and came to the decision that I had to change my stitching technique. The final outcome came out pretty well. The different stitching techniques helped to add more dimension into the piece, and also resembled how bedding crinkles and creases. I began the process of the sound piece by doing the design sprint and choosing the theme of the artifact to be identity, specifically my cultural identity. I knew from this point on I wanted sounds from my everyday life to be involved, whether it's my jewellery or existing music. I then researched websites that beginners could use and easily navigate to make music. The website I decided on was BandLab, which I am shown using here. It was initially difficult to add in instruments and alter recordings, but I soon got the hang of it. At this point, I did more design sprint work. This made me more open to what I could include in this piece, but also more intentional with what I wanted to create. I had already scrapped one draft, and then while working on the second, I thought it would be best if I took a break. In this time, I focused on other artifacts. This break led me to start anew and end up with a final piece. The elements I used to make the final piece were my bangles, some pitched up and some as the original sound, beads moving around, and a guitar. The background sound that I used and felt that pulled it all together was the Gayatri Mantra, which I listened to each morning. This contains different instruments like the flute and sitar. Overall, I felt the final artifact created a sense of peace, and something I realised after listening to it that it remains to ring in your ears. Not sure if it was just me, but anyway, here is a snippet of the artifact. This piece is called Passing By. For this artifact, I wanted to make something revolving around my personal life while still linking to the theme, time. The final concept was to illustrate a cycle that represents death and rebirth. This linked to each of the 3 subtopics. I tried to have 4, but time was rather difficult to split up into subtopics. Regardless, I made it work. I initially wanted to make a physical cycle and make it into a moving image. However, I chose to make it on Adobe Illustrator as it linked most to my overall theme for 4 artifacts. Unfortunately, I hadn't taken any more photos or video during this process, but trust me, it took a while. My moving image is titled Duration of the Soul. It represents the concept of Atman, which regards the eternal soul and reincarnation. The cycle is reversed while the symbols still remain in the same place, and the cycle rebuilds along with the symbols. This demonstrates how you can live one life and be reborn into another, and always leave behind a lasting impact, big or small, on one person's life or many. That's all of my artifacts and the process behind it. The last thing to complete was my artist statement and descriptions. Everything should be available on an online exhibition soon. This will be linked below.